How we doing? And good morning to you today. IB Countdown to Kickoff is off and rolling. I'm with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. Glad to have you with us. And I apologize in advance for the YouTube live stream watchers if there is any confusion. When we set the show every morning or, before every show, there's obviously a place where you can schedule the time and all that stuff. And I believe I forgot to select an actual time when I first scheduled it. So I went back and put in 10 a.m. A lot of people have been ready to go for this. Welcome to you. Glad you're here. How are you this morning, Vince?
I'm great. I've been up and at 'em for quite a while, dishing my kid off to the championship breakfast this morning and getting ready for the show and everything else. And it's going to be a long, busy day, Sean
It is.
Stiers. So,
it's the first of 3 shows for you today, if I'm not mistaken.
I will not be involved in the middle show.
I thought you were going to be in the middle show, but not. But yes. I thought you were going to be involved in all 3.
I will be at the regional championship soccer game at that time. So
gotcha.
I will be dad, and then I will be back to being IB man later on. But yeah, I'll let you kind of take it from here about what that middle show is all about.
Yeah, and the reason there is a middle show, there's just a lot going on today. It's a night game at Notre Dame, so that obviously is more time during the day for one thing. But Brian Driscoll has a special live show. He's going to be on campus at Notre Dame today. This is a pretty big deal, actually, the fact that he's allowed to be on campus.
Yeah.
At 3:30, they're going to be doing a live show. They're going to be over by the Golden Dome, the administration building. I don't know exactly, but over by the Golden Dome is what I've been told. Fans will want to get there 3:15-ish for a 3:30 start this afternoon. You're not going to want to miss it. There's going to be some cool stuff going on. Big surprise coming up during the show.
Yeah, so make sure that if you are in town, if you are anywhere nearby, go there, be in person. We want as many people there as possible, cheering, getting excited, the whole thing. So make sure you get there. If you can't get there in person, make sure you are watching at 3:30 like you normally would right here on the YouTube channel, 3:30 sharp. Big surprise, big announcement, however you want to phrase it. It's pretty cool stuff, I have to say. I want to say this is probably a first.
I think you're right.
I will say this is a first. So check it out.
Ryan Roberts is going to have a recruiting piece for us coming up here in a little bit. He's done this in advance, but we'll have that coming up in a little bit because this is a big recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. Tons of recruits on campus. And, that's kind of part of what is going to be going on with Brian's show at 3:30 today, for that matter. But welcome wherever you happen to be listening today. Hit the like button while you're in here. Subscribe, rate, review. Robbie, one of our regulars, he's an Auburn guy. I assume he is listening down in Alabama. And Brent Smith, good morning, Irish Nation. 6:30 in the a.m. in Monterey, California. He obviously put that in a little bit ago, but Monterey is a place I'm familiar with. I spent a year there. That's where I won't say my Army stint began, because of course it began at good old Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri at basic training. But after Fort Leonard Wood, spent a year at the Defense Language Institute learning to Gavarit the Ruski, the Russian language there for a while. Beautiful Monterey. Everyone I think knows about the beauty of Monterey, even if you haven't been there.
I've heard of it.
It is a great place. It is a great place. That is right. So we've got them listening all over the place, whether it happens to be Alabama, Monterey, California, all points in between. I know we've got guys and girls all over the country.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Glad to have you with
Notre Dame game day. So
that's right, baby.
We're all fired up over here.
And we've got Notre Dame and Stanford today. It's a series that has taken place every year since 1997, with the exception of the 2020 pandemic season. Of course, when all the rivalries pretty much.
Pretty much sucked, but not having Stanford on the schedule didn't suck, though.
No,
just saying.
Won't disagree with that. The Legends Trophy is on the line today, Vince. The Irish looking for their 4th straight win in the series, which would be their longest streak against Stanford since winning 7 straight from 2002 through 2008. And it's kind of crazy to think that as up and down as really that stretch from '02 to '08 ended up being for Notre Dame, they still dominated Stanford back then. That was, the pre-Harbaugh era. And of course, once Jim Harbaugh arrived and then, handed off the baton to David Shaw, things were on the upward swing, but things have also, the pendulum has really swung the other way. And we'll get into more Stanford, but they're a bit down right now, obviously.
Yes, they are. They are down, and the problem is it doesn't look like there's not a whole lot of light at the end of the tunnel for the Cardinal, and I think that's the biggest issue for me when it comes to Stanford and the viability of them being on the Notre Dame schedule. And I know we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit more, but I just don't see it being worthwhile right now having them around. I know that sounds bad.
Agree.
But there are other options. If being out on the West Coast is your be all end all, there are other options. I will say.
Well, and look, again, we'll get into this. I guess we'll just save that because we've got that coming up in rapid fire. We can save that so we don't get sidetracked on that too early.
Which we're good about doing.
I agree with your sentiment for sure.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, of course, coming off a 28-20 win over BYU, Shamrock Series last week. Let me start you off with this. You like to call me the stat guy.
You are the stat guy, man. Come up with the greatest stats.
Is there a stat from that game that stands out to you, Vince?
Yeah, I mean, there is. To be honest with you, and I know this isn't a sexy stat necessarily or one where, you're going to come up with, I'm sure, that dives into this whole thing. But for me, it was Drew Pine's stat line, 22 of 28.
Really good.
262 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. And the pick really wasn't his fault. It got tipped at the line, et cetera. So there was an over-under, I always like trying to play those parlays and things like that. There was an over-under of like 225. I was like, I don't feel so hot about that.
Yeah.
And he ends up like majorly eclipsing that
for
him. And so I was pleasantly surprised with the statistical production of Drew Pine. He is progressively getting better and better and better as they open up the playbook a little bit more. And he has risen to the challenge up to this point. And so I've been impressed. And I'm not saying that he's proven me wrong, but he's doing a pretty darn good job of making me think twice about, a lot of the things that I said about Drew. And again, none of them were negative, but he is exceeding my expectations right now. And his stat line from the BYU game speaks to that.
Yeah, I agree. And we're going to talk more specifically about him in a minute. And, part of why I think he's able to have so much success, especially these last 2 games. Now, obviously, the defense you're playing against, is a part of it. But
sure.
Notre Dame was 11 of 16 on third down in that game. And, of course, I think it's like, it was at least 5 of those that ended up going to Michael Mayer, and they converted first downs. One of those third downs was a touchdown pass to Michael Mayer. But if you look at 11 of 16, which is just a great number, this team was not good the first couple weeks of the season on third down. 8 of 16 or 11 of 16 in that game, 8 of 14 the week before that against North Carolina. So if you combine those 2 games, 63% on third down the last 2 weeks. And the third downs are a heck of a lot easier to convert when you're running the ball the way they are, because they were just 29 of 68, 43% for the season, before those first 2 games. Now, the last 2 games, they're up at 63%. So they're just killing it on third down right now. And again, the running game getting going the way it has really helped that third down percentage these last couple games.
Oh, absolutely. And that honestly is a great stat, because winning or losing a game a lot of times comes down to, turnover margin, third down efficiency, that kind of stuff. And they have been so good on third down, and they were so good specifically last week. I mean, you said it, right? Their third down completion percentage was off the charts. They were even converting tough third downs. I mean, it was impressive. I will say that. And it just seemed like it didn't matter what, third down that they were trying to accomplish, they were accomplishing it. And it shows in the final stat line. So I was really impressed by that.
Absolutely. And of course, I think the biggest story to come out of this game, and NBC did a good job of hitting this pretty hard, which they should have, especially in the first half. Michael Mayer becoming Notre
Oh, yeah.
Dame's all-time receptions leader for tight ends. 11 catches, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns in the game. The 11 touchdowns are a single game record for an Irish tight end. His 146 career receptions that he now has are 6 more than Tyler Eifert, so that he's the career leader there. And it was just an all-around huge day,
Yeah.
obviously, for Michael Mayer last week.
The guy, I mean, he continues to impress, obviously. He just when you think that he's not open, he makes himself open.
He's open again.
It's just, I mean, Drew Pine throws him open. Drew Pine obviously trusts Michael Mayer, maybe sometimes more than he should, but at the same time, it's impressive. I mean, it is very impressive what he is able to do when he is clearly, or should be clearly, the focus of any defense that he goes up against. And it was funny because it was like, I was thinking about BYU. It's like, did you guys even prepare for this game? I mean, did you notice that 87 plays for Notre Dame? That you might want to try to shut him down a little bit. And then when they started double teaming him, it still didn't matter.
I know.
I mean, he's that good at the moment in receiving the football. So, I mean, he continues to impress. And I know that the kid down in Georgia, Bowers, is a good tight end, and he does different things than Michael Mayer. But I'm sorry, there's not much of an argument to be made who the best tight end in the country is.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, the guy has 33 catches now this season. They're the most in the nation for an FBS tight end. And again, he's the focal point of the offense. And I'm curious to see, as this offense evolves, does that change or does that continue? Because that's what's the most impressive thing is, one, Michael Mayer, from the day he stepped on campus as a freshman,
Right.
we saw, what he has been, what he was able to do. He has this innate ability to just know how to get open. If it's a zone, he knows the soft spots in the zone and, kind of where to sit down in that zone, finds a way to get open. And then, as you were just talking about, even when he's not open, when he's double teamed, maybe, Drew Pine just knows that he can trust Michael Mayer, and Michael Mayer, he can put that ball where only Michael Mayer can get it.
Yeah. I mean, and then he goes and makes the play. I mean, it just feels like the catch radius of this guy, and I know that's a technical term, but the overall area that Michael Mayer can catch the ball, and he has such strong hands that if you get it anywhere near him, he's going to come down with it.
Yeah.
So from that aspect, I get why Drew Pine is. I mean, I kind of get why he goes after him. He's like,
why wouldn't you?
Right. You know that if you throw it anywhere in the general direction of Michael Mayer, he's probably going to come down with it, right?
Yeah.
And, and so I get that that's a security blanket, but that's the next step in the maturation process of Drew Pine, right? Is that he needs to be able to break away from Michael Mayer a little bit and get some other guys involved, because eventually they're going to run into a defense that can, I don't think anybody can take Michael Mayer away, but they can slow him down. You know what I mean? He won't have double-digit catches for over 100 yards. That eventually will happen. And so either the wide receivers need to step up or Drew Pine needs to get them involved.
All of this, yes, all of the above. Mayer spoke after the game in Vegas last week. He talked about the connection that he has with Drew Pine, which has pretty much been forged on the practice field. Here's what Mayer said.
I mean, we're throwing each other. He's throwing me balls all day in practice, but then we're staying after in practice to getting balls. Sunday or Mondays on our off days or our lift days, we're going out there and getting some balls. It's a lot of practice, a lot of repetition. It works. It really does. And it worked today.
I mean, the long and the short of it is these guys work on it. It hasn't happened by mistake, Vince. They're staying after practice, throwing more balls with each other. I guess, again, the next question is, are some of these receivers maybe staying after practice as well to work with Drew Pine?
That is the ultimate question, and we haven't heard it out of the mouths of anybody yet. I'm going to go ahead and be the glass is half full guy and say that they are doing that and that they are sticking around and they're running routes and they're doing all the things that they need to do. Number one, I would think from their own personal, get yourself better situation that they would want to do that. And number two, Michael Mayer is the consummate leader. He's the captain on that team. He's not out there by himself. You know what I mean? Like, he's making sure that there's other guys out there with him catching those balls. That's what I think is going on.
No, I agree. We know there's another level for these receivers to step up. We saw to an extent, like Jaden Thomas kind of became really, to me, Lorenzo Styles had a nice day against North Carolina. Really, it was about that one catch. Maybe to an extent, Jaden Thomas's day was about the one catch. But again, it was an important one, the 32-yard touchdown pass. Drew Pine, as you mentioned, 22 for 28, 3 touchdowns last week, 720 yards now for the season, completing 72% of his passes with 9 touchdowns. And let me ask you this, because we talked about this earlier in the week. Pine has been, a lot of people early on were referring to Pine as a poor man's Ian Book. But, like when you look at how Pine is doing, would you buy or sell him right now as being an even better version of Ian Book?
So to the question about him being a poor man's Ian Book, I'm going to sell that all day. I don't think that that's the case. I think that he is performing on par with what Ian Book did when he first took over in 2018. And he's also willing to throw the ball downfield. He is putting the ball in places that Ian Book never would have done. I mean, he would either,
exactly.
And again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I'll bring it up again. He was either too scared, was too worried about protecting the football. However you want to say it, okay, he wouldn't do it. All right. He had the physical tools to do it. I think that Ian Book is more physically gifted than Drew Pine. Okay. I do. But Drew Pine's willing to make plays that Ian Book was never willing to even attempt.
Right.
And I think that makes you a better quarterback.
Just like the throw to Jaden Thomas. Like,
yeah.
that's a throw that Ian Book more times than not would not throw, because his thing was all, and a good quarterback has to be able to, one, throw to a spot, like if you're talking about, like an out or a flag or whatever, that ball has to be thrown before the break of the receiver. Too many times,
right?
Even though Ian Book had a nice completion percentage, he was waiting until after the break, and is the receiver open or not?
Right.
You've got to trust. You've got to trust yourself. You've got to trust the receiver that he's going to be able to make that throw. And a lot of that, I think, does come down to the film study that Drew Pine has, but it also has to do with the trust that he has in some of these guys and their ability to make plays that Ian Book didn't always show in some guys.
Well, and you can talk about the throw that he made to Boykin right at the end of the bowl game, right? That was a throw down the field, but he had to make that throw. He didn't have a choice.
That's exactly it.
That's the difference, right? The throw to Braden Thomas was not a you need to make this throw, right? It was within the scheme of the game. And look, I will also say that was not a great throw. Braden Thomas made a play on that ball. It was not a great throw, right? But he was willing to at least take that shot. And it was not at a point of the game where he absolutely had to make that throw. It was within the flow of the offense.
Right.
That's what we never saw Ian Book do.
But like, Bill Walsh says Pine's reads are good. He's seeing the open guys. Now he's not seen some open guys at times as well, but he says the O-line is getting him time too. And again, like if you want to go back and talk about what was one of the issues that I think a lot of people had with Ian Book is he would have time in the pocket.
Yes.
But he went through those progressions once, and if he didn't see something when he went through that first progression, what's he doing? Ejecting from the pocket, taking off too soon sometimes. And that's, there were a couple times the other night where obviously Drew Pine had plenty of time in the pocket, and he's like a windshield wiper going back and forth through the progressions. He's waiting. He's not panicking and not ejecting too soon. And that's big, I think, as well.
Well, and it's huge because you're right. Ian Book would have ejected from that pocket way beforehand. He always had the happy feet. He never really got over that. So even when he had a clean pocket, he was getting himself out of there really, really too fast. And that was a major problem with him. And that was so frustrating to me, to be honest with you, because he would have a good pocket and then he would try to twist and roll out of it. And then sometimes he would roll into a sack because of that, Stay in the pocket, go through your reads. Drew Pine is not afraid to stand in the pocket, man. I tell you what, almost to a detriment. Like, it was almost making me nervous at times. He's like, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Got to do something. Got to get rid of it. Come on, get rid of it. But he's super calm in there. And that shows immense trust in the guys in front of him, which that's huge. You got to be able to trust your offensive line. And he definitely does. And so that, I'll tell you what I'm excited about, Sean, being at the game today. You know, they haven't been at home in a month, right? And so we haven't had that live all 22 view that we get from the press box, right? So it's harder for us to be able to see whether wide receivers are open or whether they're not. In a month, I want to be able to see the progression of Pine and see, okay, is he hitting guys that are actually open, or are the wide receivers struggling to get open?
Yeah.
I'm excited to see that tonight. And I hope that he has moved, beyond the last time we were able to see him in person.
And people have been, making the comments in here about Book, didn't want to make a mistake, purple face Kelly, and other people talk about Kelly ripping Ian Book. And some of that's true because, like the don't turn it over stuff was obviously pounded in to Ian Book, and you're going to do what's emphasized. And that was obviously, a big part of what they valued in Ian Book, the fact that he didn't commit turnovers. And, and it's there's obviously a lot of different levels to why he would or wouldn't take some of those chances. It did seem like more in his nature that he wasn't, and like throwing into coverage. Well, it's one thing, like to throw a deep post with a safety waiting back there into double coverage, but it was a different situation, like with Jaden Thomas, when he's got a one-on-one matchup and Drew Pine's going to throw that ball up there for him and let him make a play on it, even though there was really good coverage by the BYU defensive back, but he's also not throwing into double coverage in that situation. He's seeing single coverage, letting a big-bodied receiver go up and make the play. And again, that was stuff that Ian Book wasn't willing to do. How much of that, because it was hammered into him by Brian Kelly, how much of it was just, his nature, I don't know, I guess,
part of it,
water under the bridge at this point. But again, Drew Pine is, he sees the field differently, I think, and his willingness, to trust himself at times, I just think is different than what it was with Ian Book.
Well, and I will also say the demeanor of Drew Pine is different than Ian Book ever was.
Yeah, there's a different kind of confidence.
Yeah, and even if Brian Kelly was still the head coach, I don't see Drew Pine playing any differently. I just don't see the yelling and the screaming getting to Drew Pine. I mean, look what happened in this first game. What did the yelling and screaming do for him? It made him better. Okay? So, we can all make fun of the do your effing job and all that whole thing, but that got him fired up. Like, that made him do his job, right? And so I think it would have been potentially the opposite reaction if he's getting balled out by Kelly on the sideline. So I think they would have handled it completely differently between Book and Pine. I think there's a little bit of truth to the fact that Book was scared of getting yelled at. I think there's a little bit of truth to that. And that became his demeanor. And even when he went to the Saints, remember he got that start. Was it Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football? It was in prime time.
It was a night game, yeah.
And he wouldn't make the throws he needed to make. And you can't do that in the NFL, right? I mean, you just can't. And that's why he didn't start again.
That hesitation in the NFL is just going to kill you, because again, you've got to be willing to make a throw before a guy is open. And that's the biggest thing with Ian Book. And that's just, he ended up getting cut by the Saints. I think he's still with the Eagles right now, but wish him well. But I just
absolutely, and it's nothing against him as a person. I mean, I don't want people to think we're taking personal pot shots at Ian Book. We're just talking about their play and we're comparing and contrasting him and Drew Pine because people just love to compare the two of them.
That's, I've always said the ability to perform or not perform is not a character flaw. And, we're not ripping someone's character for it. You've got to be able to analyze their play. And I don't think anything we've said about Ian Book is invalid. It's all valid stuff.
Look, man, I had, when I was in high school, I was a bit of a holding machine on the outside as a wide receiver. Doesn't make me a bad person. But I definitely
stock blocker.
I definitely had a touchdown called back because I held on the edge. Okay, so you can criticize somebody's play versus them as a person,
right?
And still be okay, So just want to throw that out there.
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, a few different injuries to address. Of course, the biggest one being the season-ending
Oh,
injury
man.
to Bo Bauer, his knee. I mean, you hate to see it. A captain, a
Yeah.
guy who's been here for 5 years,
It's
and
2 captains out this
unfortunately,
year. 2
I know. I was
captains.
thinking about that. After the Zoom the other day, the fact now you've got Bauer and Avery Davis both gone with knee injuries.
Yeah, right. And that's so tough. And then the knee is just it's such a fickle place. You know what I mean? You can
Yep.
barely be doing anything and you just snap a ligament in there. And I've done a lot of stupid stuff and a lot of sports in my day and never had a knee issue. And then the other guys, it just feels like they go one knee, the other knee, and it just issue after issue. And
Right.
you can't blame the surface, you can't blame this, you can't blame that. It's just sometimes it's just dumb luck. And I feel so bad for him. I think that he had, found his place in this defense. He's obviously a stalwart on special teams. And I think that was probably going to be his route to the NFL, was going to be as a special teams player. And now that all kind of gets put into flux with a knee injury. And so I feel so bad for him. And, now it's going to be an opportunity for some of these younger guys to step up. And I know that just like the backup quarterback is the most popular guy on the team, there's been some backup linebackers that have been super popular that everybody wants to see on the field. And I think now you're going to get,
Got a chance now.
you're going to get that opportunity, and we're going to see how they do.
Prince Kollie, people have been clamoring for more of him, especially, we've seen him the last couple of weeks. And,
Yeah.
the highlight being that sack that he had. I mean, the closeout on that sack was just really fun to watch as well. But we're going to see more Prince Kollie. And so I'll be curious to see how that looks. And I also wonder, like, maybe sometimes, like in some of those dime type situations, like, do you maybe see more Ramon Henderson, like a safety, kind of fill some of that? I think that could be a possibility to give them, guys who could, especially against an opponent like Stanford, who wants to throw it the way they can, and with some of the big receivers that they have out there.
I think that would be a really good decision. It sounds like, and I don't want to jump the gun here, it sounds like Tarek Bracy's going to be back potentially. And so if he is your nickel, when you go to dime, like you said, bringing in a guy like Ramon Henderson to fill one of those linebacker spots would be good. And then you could have a guy like Jack Kaiser, in there at linebacker, because he's used to playing in space. And so I think that, to me, that would be my dime personnel. I think that would be kind of the way to go. And of course, you can rotate those guys up front on the line.
Or I guess even Kaiser as the linebacker, and then Henderson kind of as the rover / nickel. That kind. Well, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different roles that I think a guy like Ramon Henderson can fill in those passing situations.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And you can obviously blitz him. There's all kinds of different things you can do with Ramon. And that's what I would do for sure, because you've got guys that can cover. Obviously, bringing JD in and covering in the pass game, that's not his strength. So it's probably not what I would do if I had to pick a linebacker. Excuse me. And I probably wouldn't pick one of the younger guys just because there's a lot going on in the dime.
Yeah. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop says, great show. Lots of great points. Score guess. Don't get ahead of yourself, Charlie, because the score prediction is coming up. We gotta pace ourselves. We've got just a ton of content on the show coming up today. So we, of course, will have a score prediction, but we've got to hold off on that for a little bit. Speaking of Charlie Weiss, I don't know, I've
not sure where
people have asked me, this has come up a couple of different times in the last few weeks. I can't remember, like the whole backstory about how Charlie Weiss and the way he completely sunk Kansas football. When he was a head coach. I think it was Stuart Mandel, one of the guys from The Athletic, did a story, I think just yesterday, about I think it was the 10 most puzzling head coaching hires of the last 12 years. Charlie Weiss at Kansas was number 1 on the list.
Wow.
Les Miles at Kansas was number 3 on the list. So, and I mean, you could really throw in David Beatty, Turner Gill. Kansas has made some really questionable hires before Lance Leopold.
That's
over
fair.
The last few years, but Charlie is number 1, and they mentioned, the points that I mentioned when we talked about it a week or two ago. So
that's hilarious.
Yes.
I think he was listening to the show. Hey, that's all.
Maybe
That's all
so.
that tells me.
Bill says you look younger today, Vince. How are you doing that?
Probably just because I decided to shave. Decided to keep myself up.
You do look a little bit, less of the shadow on the face. You mentioned Tarek Bracy. Howard Cross missed last week with an ankle. Christmas started, but Cross is supposed to be back. And, again, we're going to get more into the Stanford head-to-head matchup in a little bit. I think that having Cross back could be big against Stanford's offense today as well.
Well, and obviously you lost Jacob Lacey before last game, and so that hurts the depth a little bit. And you bring in Gabriel Rubio, and look, he looked good at times, and then he looked like a rookie at times, right?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be kind of a maturation process as well. And so yes, bringing him back, and he'll probably be the starter there. That's a massive get back for Notre Dame.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we were originally going to have Ryan Roberts, our recruiting guy, on live, but he had something come up. We wanted to, get the recruiting aspect of this weekend in here because it is a big recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. This night game, the only night game, home night game in September, and all that different stuff. And there are a lot of recruits that are going to be on campus today. So Ryan was good enough to kind of pre-record a little recruiting piece for us. And he said toward the end, there's kind of a special surprise guest who popped in with him. So I have no idea who this is going to be. So here's Ryan. When we come back after Ryan, we've got, of course, we'll get more into the Stanford matchup specifically. We've got our game prediction that Charlie Weiss's last belt loop was asking about. And we've got, all kinds of stuff. We've got other national predictions still to come as well. We've just got it all today, Vince.
That's what we do. I mean, that's why you show up to IB Countdown to Kickoff, because we bring it from all different angles.
That's right. So here's Ryan on how big this recruiting aspect is this weekend for Notre Dame.
Good morning, IB Nation. It's a big Saturday here. Notre Dame taking on Stanford at home, which of course means it's another big recruiting weekend, arguably the biggest recruiting weekend. Well, not arguable. It's the best recruiting weekend, biggest recruiting weekend until the Clemson game. So I wanted to give you a quick preview. So it is a Saturday morning in the Roberts household. So if you hear Juliet at any point in this video, please understand father life. You know what I'm saying? So let's get into some of the big visitors for the Notre Dame game against Stanford. Is going to be one that you will not want to miss. Of course, the big headline that we've been talking about for several weeks is 2023 running back recruits out of St. Louis, Missouri, Christian Brothers High School. Of course, Jeremiah Love, who has been trending well in Notre Dame's favor over the last couple months, according to Irish Breakdown. Some others may not see it the same way, but we have been very, very on the forefront that we believe that Notre Dame has been the favorites for this one for some time. So after his visit last month for the Marshall game, he took one more visit for Texas A&M. Coming into this one was a trip that was made a couple weeks ago, trip plans. We have been talking about that we expect this one to be done, made a decision sometime in the near future. So the fact that Notre Dame has gotten another visit for Jeremiah Love is obviously a great sign for the Irish. So keep your eyes out for Jeremiah Love here today. Big opportunity for Notre Dame to really put the finishing touches on this one, potentially in his most recent visit here to South Bend for the Stanford game. Second player that you want to keep close eyes on, it'll actually be his first trip to South Bend ever. That is Mr. Brandon Hillman, who is an athlete out of Churchland High School in Portsmouth, Virginia. So this young man listed at 6'1", 200 pounds. If you watch his highlight tape, you'll see him at quarterback mostly, dynamic dual threat quarterback for Churchland, but also defensively, he is a hard-hitting safety that comes down in the box, really has a lot of physicality to him. So Notre Dame offered him last month, and there is a big push now for Brandon Hillman for several programs. There's been a lot of big players that have been keeping eyes on him, including the University of Tennessee. So with Hillman, Notre Dame sees this young man not at any one position right now. He could be a running back. He could be a wide receiver. He could be a safety. He could be a rover. Maybe even be a will linebacker if he gains enough weight. This kid is truly an athlete recruit in the Notre Dame class. This is not a plan B for Notre Dame either. This is a player that has gotten onto their radar a little later because at most of his recruitment, he was talking about, I'm a quarterback, I'm a quarterback, I'm a quarterback. He has now opened it up to playing different positions on the next level. So Notre Dame is now making a big push. They want him in the class no matter what. This is not a plan B player. This is an athlete that Notre Dame truly wants in this class. So he is the other big 2023 player, 2023 recruit who will be on campus. This will be his first trip to South Bend. So it could be a big momentum boost, could be a big opportunity for Notre Dame to really make waves with a young man who is a little bit of a late riser in the recruiting ranking perspective, but has a lot of upside, obviously, as a player on the next level. Other big player that will be on campus for now the fourth time in the last year and a half, that is Ryan Wingo, star 2024 wide receiver out of St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. So Notre Dame is making a big push in St. Louis recent years. Talk about Gabriel Rubio, talk about Tyson Ford, talk about Christian Gray this cycle, potentially nabbing Jeremiah Love if everything goes well moving forward here. Next step will be for next class. Jeremiah Mcclellan from Christian Brothers is another big target, but Ryan Wingo, arguably the top receiver in the 2024 class, 6'2", 200 pounds, dynamic athlete. And so make no mistake about it. Younger brother of former Arkansas running back Ronnie Wingo, this is a national recruit. Everyone from the SEC to the West Coast teams to all the Northern Powers are going to be in on Ryan Wingo. This is that type of football player. Consider him a 5-star depending on which recruiting service that you like to covet, right? So for Ryan, Notre Dame is going to have to win a dogfight here. Going to have to. But the key part here, and I want to reiterate this again, his fourth trip now to South Bend. He made one a couple months ago where he was talking about, hey, I don't need to check out South Bend. I've already been there, right? Like he wants to use recruiting process as a tool to see all the different schools and make a really good, sound decision for himself. But the fact that he has now returned to South Bend again for a game visit is a really good sign. And especially with how Notre Dame has really made a push in the St. Louis area, if they're able to get a guy like Jeremiah Love on top of Christian Gray, maybe you get in with Jeremiah Mcclellan in the 2024 class as well, this is where you really start to create a pipeline in St. Louis. So big opportunity today for Notre Dame to get in with Ryan Wingo, star pass catcher in 2024. As I said, Jeremiah Mcclellan, another big-time player from Christian Brothers. His improvement from 2021 to 2022 now as a junior has been kind of jaw-dropping, to be honest. He went from a really good player in 2020 and as a sophomore to now a dynamic player as a junior here. So he'll be on campus today. No surprise, as Jeremiah Love makes the return to South Bend. Jeremiah McClellan, his teammate, also makes the return to South Bend. There's interest here from both sides. I think there's a lot of interest. Notre Dame is definitely going to push for this one, especially with the jump that he has made as a junior. Jeremiah is very, very in on Notre Dame. He has a very high opinion of them. But again, this is going to be a dogfight. He's going to be a big riser in this class. He's already considered a pretty consensus top 200 player in the class. But I think that he even has a chance, like Cam Williams, to rise in the rankings. So they'll have to knock this one out of the park again. But you got to feel good about it. You have to feel good about it. Last one that I wanted to talk about extensively before throwing out a couple more notes for you all. Christopher Tarek, who is from Glenbard West in Glen Ellen, Illinois, 2023 offensive lineman. I know there's been a big talking point recently. Is there a replacement for Elijah Page in the 2023 class? Notre Dame does not have a real true left tackle in the class anymore since he decommitted and committed to USC. Can Christopher Tarek be that guy? So what this means is that Notre Dame is doing their due diligence on some offensive tackles in the 2023 class to potentially push it back to 5. This is not a direct replacement, though, for Elijah Page. What this is that Notre Dame is monitoring Christopher Tarek because he right now is committed to the University of Wisconsin. And they are doing their homework. And this is going to be a big I don't want to call it a test, but this is going to be a big opportunity for Notre Dame to get to face with Christopher, to see if it's a good fit, to see if it's someone they want to push for. I don't think there's any plans right now to push for Christopher Tarek, but that could change if he impresses on campus, if he looks the part, the eye test, all that good stuff. So Christopher Tarek is worth keeping an eye on. I wouldn't say that he's a guy that Notre Dame is pushing for as of right now, but that could obviously change. But we will see. It's going to be a big opportunity for Christopher to get on campus here and see if it is a good fit. So big step there. Wanted to throw out this cool notes. 2024 defensive end from Charlotte Christian in North Carolina, the son of former Notre Dame great Bryant Young and NFL Hall of Famer Bryce Young will be on campus here today. Now, he's not a newcomer to Notre Dame, right? He's obviously grown up with his dad being an all-time great in South Bend. So he is a 6'5", 215 pound, 6'4", depending on which recruiting ranking you're looking at, still developing into his body. He did get an offer from Notre Dame, but I believe that Notre Dame is still doing the evaluation process with a guy like a Bryce Young. Potential big riser in the class, more tools than finished product that you would expect from a junior with a Notre Dame offer, but he has a lot of tools. So getting Bryce Young on campus with Bryant today is going to be a big moment for Notre Dame. And then last one that I really want to hit on, a player that I know a couple people have asked about. He's on the visitor list for today, 2024 linebacker from Lovejoy High School in Lucas, Texas. That is Peyton Pierce, top 200 kid across the 2024 class at linebacker. Was asked, what position is Peyton best at the next level? Could be a Mike, could be a Will. I think that he could be either. He's got really nice speed, reported to run in the high 4.5s, low 4.6s, and he's a really physical downhill player as well, so he could definitely play that Mike position. We're not sure where Notre Dame stands with Peyton Pierce. Right now, I would say this. Notre Dame is doing an excellent job the last two cycles really recruiting the linebacker position and continuing to harbor that momentum that they have with Marcus Freeman, with Al Golden, with James Laurinaitis, continuing to recruit the position at a high level. Could Peyton Pierce be the next? We'll see. I think this visit today will be a big opportunity to really probe interest, because I think right now, from everything I've heard, Peyton is very intrigued by Notre Dame, but until he gets on campus and he really experiences it all, it's hard to tell what the extent of the interest is. So it'll be a big opportunity for Peyton Pierce to be on campus. Those are a lot of the notables. There will also be several other really talented players on campus. I think we have about 30 players that are expected in the 2023, 2024, and even 2025 class to be on campus today for Notre Dame, including several Notre Dame commits that will be back on campus. Quarterback CJ Carr, 2024 quarterback out of Saline High School in the state of Michigan, will be on campus. So will 2023 running back wide receiver Dylan Edwards, projected to play wide receiver on the next level for Notre Dame out of Derby High School in Kansas. 2023 tight end out of Bloomfield Hills in Michigan, brother Rice. He is a preferred walk-on tight end. Henry Garrity, will also be on campus today. Of course, as you should expect, every single home game, Mr. Drake Bowen, linebacker out of Andrean High School, 2023, will be on campus again today. Mentioned the St. Louis pipeline that is being built. Part of that is Christian Gray, the Smet Jesuit 2023 cornerback out of St. Louis, Missouri, will be on campus again today, which is another big help, I think, in this Jeremiah Love recruitment because they have a very good relationship. 2023 safety Ben Minich out of Westchester, Ohio, Lakota West High School will be on campus as well as preferred walk-on kicker Marcelo Diomedes out of Glen Bard West High School in Glen Ellen, Illinois. So as you can see, it's a packed list. A lot of incredible players that will be on campus today for Notre Dame. Make sure to stay locked. IrishBreakdown.com. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. We will have consistent coverage of the recruiting weekend for Notre Dame. We'll be giving some tidbits on the board, as we always do after these big visits. And I'll also say this. If you have not heard, 3:30 Eastern time today. You want to get there a little bit beforehand. You're on campus at Notre Dame. try to get near the Gold Dome at 3 o'clock. There will be more details. We're going to have a special show here today. I think you're going to really enjoy what we have working for you there. Come here, Jules. And I think Juliet wants to come say hi. Come here, baby. So make sure that you lock in to 3 o'clock, 3:30 Eastern. We're going to have a special show with some special guests, special announcements. And with that, we're going to end this.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Daddy. Jules, can you say go Irish? Go Irish from Juliet. Have a great day. We'll be talking again to you all very soon. Remember, 3:30 Eastern time. Stay locked in.
All right, that's Ryan Roberts, of course, our recruiting guy, who you guys all know and love. I know it. And Juliet, the special guest there at the end. I wasn't expecting Juliet.
No, not at all.
She nailed it, though, with the Go Irish at the end. And again, we've got some more people who've been kind of joining in the live show as this show has gone on. So just to kind of reiterate, 3:30, Brian Driscoll is going to be streaming a special live show from over by the Golden Dome. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. There's
just a big announcement.
Really freaking cool. That's
all we can say. Big announcement.
Yep.
So check it out. If you're on campus, make sure you're there at 3:30. And I'm sure, Brian will sign autographs afterwards, things like that. But make sure you show up at 3:30, a little earlier. You want to be there a little earlier, so like 3:15, 3:20. But if not, you can definitely tune in on YouTube for the live announcement. So make sure that everybody does that. Everybody.
Yep, that's exactly right. And there's going to be even more news coming up later today that you're going to want to hear. So trust me, like if you think that what you got from Ryan was good, right? Just right now, we'll just wait until later on today.
That's right.
It's going to be really good. Going to knock it out of the park. All right, you want to talk a little Stanford now, since there is an opponent tonight.
There is an opponent now. It's not for a while. I mean, what it was 7, 8, like 9 hours from now, but it is coming, and it's going to be exciting. And if you're going to be there, you know what? I'll throw a plug in for Notre Dame. If you're going to be there, make sure that you download the Notre Dame app on your phone, because there's going to be like a light show thing that everybody can participate in. Let's see here. I know I've got it on here somewhere, but let's see. Of course, it goes slow when you want it to. But anyway, the Fighting Irish app on your phone, you download it, you do some different things, and then your phone will be like auto-tuned to the light show. And I don't know, it's going to be some sort of audience participation. So
I hadn't even heard this.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's actually really cool. So I did it, and I'll be in the press box, so it's probably not going to work out too well. But it should be pretty cool. The technology amazes me. But definitely download the app and participate.
Yes. And I think maybe if I can, since some people missed, all the Ryan stuff, they're like, what did he say? Well, he said a lot, so I can't recap everything.
Yes, he did.
Maybe if I have time when I'm done with the show, it just depends, because we gotta, I've got to upload the regular podcast and all that stuff. Maybe we can get Ryan's, recruiting specific piece loaded to YouTube, and
there you go.
Watch that later.
That's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it is Notre Dame and Stanford tonight.
Right.
This Stanford team,
Sean, it's hard to watch.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
It's hard to watch.
Thank goodness we're not covering Stanford this year. This is year 12 for David Shaw, which is like, this guy has been around for a while now, and it's just weird to see them 1-4 coming into today's game, and the only win is against Colgate.
Yeah.
It's like, for one, why is Stanford playing Colgate? But two, that's their only win right now. It's Colgate.
Yeah, not good, frankly. And their other games really, I mean, they've been close-ish, but not anything that you would say, that they're turning a corner or anything like that. Like that's the biggest issue for me.
Yeah. I agree. They've lost 10 straight Pac-12 games after losing 28-27 to Oregon State last week. And by the way, they had a fourth quarter lead in that game and lost that game by a point. And they've lost 11 consecutive games to FBS opponents.
Yeesh.
I believe it was like last October 2nd. Last year, October 2nd was the last time they won
Over a
against an
year.
FBS team, which is
Oof.
just amazing because they averaged 10 wins a season between 2011 and 2018.
Right.
And Shaw, so think about that. They averaged 10 wins a year from 2011 to 2018. They have just 12 wins over the last 3+ seasons coming into tonight's game at Notre Dame Stadium.
That's just talk about the bottom just falling out on a team. I mean, it's not like they changed head coaches. It's not like the institution changed. It's just the bottom has fallen out. And I can't believe that David Shaw has been there for 12 years. I mean, I don't know why, but it just doesn't seem like it's been that long. But the beginning, I mean, you could make the argument that the beginning of his tenure and all the success that he had while he was here was because of Jim Harbaugh. And, once the Jim Harbaugh effect kind of wore off, that's kind of when, Stanford's kind of started to hit the skids a little bit. And I know the admissions don't help anything, but they had the same admission standards when Jim Harbaugh was there.
Right.
And so that hasn't changed. I mean, that's the constant throughout. And they just haven't been able to pick up the ball and run with it.
I think one area where they have been hit is the transfer portal. They have lost some transfers.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're in the same boat Notre Dame is with the incoming transfer. Like they have a better chance getting grad transfer type guys than undergrads, just like Notre Dame. And that the fact that they've lost some transfers and it's harder to get in, traditional transfers, I think that is hurt. Now that's not, I don't think that you can make that a blanket excuse, because this is still a program that produced guys, like Toby Gerhart was tearing it up a few years back. And obviously Christian McCaffrey and, they had some Stephen Taylor, they've had some really good running backs go through there, and they've had some really good quarterbacks as well, like Andrew Luck. And, they've pumped out a lot of pro level quarterbacks, even though they're not all stars like Andrew Luck. A lot of those kind of guys that have come through.
And they got a good quarterback now, and they got a pretty decent running back in Emmitt Smith Jr. or the third or however many Emmitt Smiths there's been. But I mean, they've got decent skill kids.
Yeah.
It's just they can't seem to put it all together. And that seems to be the biggest issue for them. They're not the running threat that they used to be, that's for sure.
And that's the thing. They're definitely not winning in the trenches like we got used to seeing them win. They rank 69th in the nation in total yards right now, 400 yards per game, which is currently 2 spots ahead of Marshall, 4 spots ahead of Cal, 10 spots ahead of next week's opponent, UNLV, in that department. So, like kind of clustered in that same area. The rushing offense, though, a little over 138 a game, ranks 90th in the nation. Them and Boston College are dead last at 131 per game in terms of the 2 lowest ranked rushing offenses the Irish are going to face this season. And it is crazy to think of a Stanford team ranked that low. It's like Stanford right now, 90th. Boston College is 131st. And those, again, in terms of like rushing offenses Notre Dame will face this season, they're the 2 lowest ranked teams that Notre Dame is going to see.
Well, do you remember when they were kind of in their heyday of winning 10 games a season? They would just keep rolling out tackles and putting like tight end numbers
tackles
on them.
And tight ends.
And I mean, the tackles and the tight ends were unstinking believable. And then they would have a pretty darn good quarterback like an Andrew Luck, back there throwing the ball to 6'5", 6'6" receivers. And their offense was rolling, and you would be black and blue after a game against Stanford. That is just not the case moving forward right now, and it's a shame. It really is a shame. And people are, like you said, they got the transfer portal and all those different things. Well, it's your job as a coach to have to keep those guys in house.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody's dealing with the same problems. Everybody's dealing with the transfer portal, whether in a positive way or a negative way. It's your job to keep those guys in house, and they're just not able to do that. And David Jones says, would you say Shaw is on the hot seat? I mean, I guess, but at the same time, I don't know that they care that much.
I was going to say, we've got the interview with the Stanford beat writer coming up here in a few minutes, and we got into some of that stuff. So that'll be coming. We talked specifically, not just about this matchup, but specifically about some of the bigger picture things going on with Stanford. So that'll be coming up here in a few minutes. He'll kind of answer some of those questions that we've got coming
That's
up
good
here.
because I've got some questions about the Stanford program and just why they have fallen off so hard.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I get admissions, I get all of that, right? It's actually, I believe, more difficult to get into Stanford than it is to get into Notre Dame.
I think so.
And that is a reality, you know, and based on US News and World Report, Stanford is ranked higher than Notre Dame academically. And so there is that admissions part. I get that, but it's always been that way.
Right. Specific to this year's Stanford team, Marcus Freeman talked about some aspects of their offense this week, like their slow mesh RPO game. And here's what Freeman said about it.
It's two different dilemmas that it presents. Where if you're in zone coverage, the minute you trigger as a linebacker to go stop the run, you're opening up space behind you that they can pull it and throw it, and they're creating space and trying to put your linebackers in a run pass conflict. Well, then the answer say, okay, go play man. Well, now you're playing man-to-man coverage and with no underneath help because the backers have to be able to respect that run game. And so you got to do some different things up front to try to be able to have your backers play a little bit more patiently, and you got to be able to play man-to-man coverage at times versus some big, tall, long wideouts. And so it's a really good scheme that they've done a good job of being able to execute in games, and it's going to be a big challenge for us.
All right, Coach D'Addario, I'll let you kind of share your thoughts on the the RPO and that Stanford uses, and kind of how Notre Dame can go about defending it.
Well, the easiest way to defend it is put pressure on the mesh, right? I mean, your front is going to have to get in there and not allow them to sit there and do that slow mesh, kind of like what Wake Forest does, right?
Right.
They're even more deliberate than Stanford is. You just got to get in and you got to attack that mesh. And that's why, and I know I'm using Wake Forest as an example, but that's why Clemson was always so successful against Wake Forest in the past when Brent Venables was there, because he would just attack the mesh and just attack the mesh and attack the mesh. And the new defensive coordinator over there just didn't do that. And he allowed Wake Forest to pick them apart and go with that slow mesh. He was more worried about the back end as opposed to the front end. If I'm the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, if I'm Al Golden, I'm attacking that mesh, man. And I'm not allowing Stanford just to stand back there and have that deliberate slow mesh. You have to attack that mesh.
Well, that's why I was saying getting Howard Cross back today at the point of attack can be really huge, being able to have that. And obviously the rotation behind him with Smith and Rubio. But, Cross is still, he missed one game and he's still tied with two other guys, J.D. Bertrand and DJ Brown, for the second most tackles on this team right now with 23. And just the way he has, been able to, and he's not that huge classic 350-pound nose, he moves, and maybe that's what helps him, a little bit more agility in there, against the, between him though and the linebackers, obviously, who we've talked quite a bit about. That's going to be pretty important today. And I just wonder, how much collaboration does Marcus Freeman have with Al Golden in a matchup like this? Because this is not something that Golden, has really seen as much of coming from where he's been the last few years in the NFL.
They don't do that in the NFL. And so Brent Smith says, how do you define the mesh? The mesh is when the quarterback is holding the ball in the belly of the running back. And they literally will stand there and hold it while he is surveying what is going on. And he'll either release it or take it back, right? And so,
well, and again, this comes down to reading the extra defender that we've talked about before. You can talk about that if you want, with what a quarterback is reading when he's deciding, that RPO, run pass option, when he's making that decision.
Right, exactly. So they literally stand there, right there, and the mesh is just when they're kind of combined, right? When the running back and the quarterback are touching, they're right there. That's the mesh, right?
It's part of triple option offense with the quarterback and the fullback, that initial mesh.
That's quick. Like triple option, it's quick. It's whoop, whoop, whoop. But that's why
it's in there. Yeah.
That's why the mesh has to be so practiced and so rehearsed, because it is so fast, and the feel of the ball in the stomach of the running back has to be a certain way to know if he actually is receiving the ball or if he's allowed to let it go, and all of those different things. So it's just a different way to go about it. It allows the quarterback to read the defense a little bit longer. That's why they do it, which again is why I would say attack the mesh.
Well, and I think a big factor in this game is Notre Dame is 18th in the nation right now, averaging 3 sacks per game, whereas Stanford ranks 128th out of 131, allowing 4 sacks per game. So some teams have obviously found ways to attack that mesh over the course of this season. And again, so, like when you look at this matchup and the fact that Stanford does not run the football the way they traditionally run it, I think that, like when you kind of burrow down on this matchup, I think that is a big potential factor tonight.
Oh, no doubt about it. I agree with you completely.
They've got a big quarterback, Tanner McKee. He's 6'6", completing 63% of his passes. He is. I mean, he can see over the line. He's not Drew Pine, right?
He's your prototypical quarterback. He's all you want.
That's all you want. But I think more importantly, his top 4 leading wide receivers are big as well. Michael Wilson is 6'2", Elijah Higgins is 6'3", Bryson Tremaine is 6'4", John Humphreys is 6'5", and those are their top 4 leading wide receivers. Now they've got a running back and a tight end mixed in, so they're not like those 4 guys aren't like the 4 leading receivers, but in terms of their leading wide receivers, those are the so they've got size. How do you think Notre Dame is going to be able to contend with that?
They certainly have a type, don't they? They go out and recruit. I mean, they want that size, and that really does go back to when they were successful. I mean, their receivers were always big, right? And they would split out. They would split out their tight ends, and they'd look for physical matchups that they can win. And with the guys that you just described and the size that they have, they will win a lot of physical matchups, right? So, what can Notre Dame do? Number one, they have to be physical at the line of scrimmage, right? You can't just give those big guys free releases. You can't do that. You have to be physical at the line of scrimmage, okay? And whether that's run and press, whatever that may be, you have to be that. And the safeties are going to have to be vigilant about what these receivers are doing. You can't just double team one guy, but you got to play maybe some quarters, or you got to play some halves. You got to do some things where you can come over the top and help out some of your smaller corners. Now, Notre Dame's corners aren't tiny by any stretch of the imagination. They've got a little bit of size to them. And so I think the corners are going to be okay. Stanford's not going to run away from you, right? They're not going to stretch the field like some other teams can do. It's literally going to be some jump balls. It's going to be leverage. It's going to be things like that. So the corners are going to have to be good about their fundamentals, right? They're going to have to be able to cut underneath. They're going to have to be, they can't get lost. They can't get their hips, lost in transition. So they're going to have to be good, and the safeties are going to have to be able to help out and come over the top. They can do that. I'm not overly worried about the pass game for Stanford. Now, granted, McKee is a very accurate quarterback. He's going to put the ball where these guys can go get the ball.
Right.
But Notre Dame
helps them, obviously.
They need to be disruptive. Defensive line needs to get their hands in the air.
Got to start up front. That's where it's got to start.
And that's where the attack in the mesh, right? That's all kind of part and parcel with the whole thing. Don't let Tanner McKee sit in the pocket and pick you apart. He's got big dudes that he can go after. So don't let that happen. So, yes, you're 100% correct. That does start up front.
Defensively, Stanford, some numbers here. 110th in scoring defense, giving up 32 points a game. 121st in rush defense, allowing 207 a game. 111th total defense, giving up 431 a game. They're actually decent on third down defense, 30th. But, those other factors, I mean, man, it's like Notre Dame is now averaging about 175 rushing yards a game after going for 521 in the last 2 games combined. So do you think there's any reason to believe that rushing offense for the Irish can be slowed down tonight?
No, I do not see that. I think the game plan that Notre Dame has had the last few games, run the ball first, play action, I think that plays right into the hand of this particular opponent. In Stanford, I think they can run the ball for days against these guys. And when they start packing the box, that's when Notre Dame goes over the top. And I think they do have a quarterback that can do that, right? And I think we've seen it. And again, I want to keep seeing the playbook open up a little bit more for Drew Pine. I still want to see that. But I think they are going to be able to run the ball without much of an issue tonight.
I agree. It should not be an issue. And, I think that I think maybe we see an evolution of the passing game tonight as well. I'm
I
kind of
think you
curious to see.
could. I think this is an opportunity for them to let Drew do some things in this game.
Yeah.
I will say that.
So we still have game day rapid fire to come. It is all Notre Dame related, our game day rapid fire. And of course, we have our picks of other games from around the country after that as well. And of course, we'll also make a prediction for tonight's game. But first, Harold Gutman, who covers Stanford for the Bay Area Media Group, talked to him this week. And, a lot of this David Shaw stuff that we've been talking about, and a lot of our listeners have been asking about. At least some of it will be answered by Harold Gutman. So let's hear from him right now. We're talking a little Stanford football. Harold Gutman is with us. He's with the Bay Area News Group, covers the Cardinal. Thanks for doing this today, Harold. Appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's start, I guess, maybe kind of big picture with Stanford, because, we out here in this part of the country, not being in the conference with Stanford, we kind of shift our attention to the Cardinal once a year for the most part. But I mean, after a decade or so of really being nationally prominent, the program is just in a much different place right now. How would you kind of describe the state of Stanford football?
Yeah, for sure. It's not good. Like you said, I think the last couple of years, they went 4-8. Then they did pretty well during the COVID year. I think they went 4-2, but then 3-9, and now 1-4 this year. So you're looking at an entire class of players who won't have gone to a bowl game or really experienced the 500 season or any level of success that Stanford has been accustomed to in the last decade under David Shaw. So yeah, it's definitely trending downward. A lot of the things that Stanford used to be known for, power running game, stopping the run, controlling possession, is not happening. Like their run game has been in the bottom 10 of the FBS in the last few years. It's a little better this year, but they can't stop the run now. They're in the bottom 10 doing that. So, and they're turning the ball over like crazy. So definitely, it's not just that it's going poorly. It's just not at all what people are accustomed to seeing. So it's been a bit of a shock.
We're used to seeing, like you kind of said, power offensive lines and running backs like Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and some other guys, who are really good come through there. It seems like they've had decent recruiting classes, at least recently. How did they get to where they are right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. The talent level is there. Even at quarterback, I mean, Davis Mills, but he's a NFL quarterback. Tanner McKee is going to be probably first or second round NFL draft pick. So, they've had some NFL level talent for sure. They got some wide receivers playing the NFL right now. Tight ends still are a strong position for them. So, right. Yeah, I mean, they've definitely, I think a lot of the changes that have affected all the teams in college football, it seemed to hit Stanford harder. A lot of the teams that they're playing now, like for instance, they played USC second game of the season. I mean, USC, obviously new quarterback from Oklahoma, like a top receiver from Pitt. They were able to take like 30 some transfers and just really revitalize that squad pretty quickly. But Stanford, just because of the academic requirements, they're not able to take Stanford. They get maybe one graduate transfer a year. They got a safety from Oklahoma, but a lot of the ways that teams improve quickly, Stanford isn't able to take advantage of. So, I mean, that's part of it. That's not all of it. Obviously, the downward trend started well before this kind of unlimited transfer and NIL money came in. Well, but I think that's definitely part of it.
And that's kind of, Notre Dame is obviously in the same boat. The academics, or at least similar. And that's something that Notre Dame goes through, is like, it's much easier to get in a grad transfer than it is an underclass transfer. I assume, is that kind of the same for Stanford? Are they in that same kind of boat?
Yeah, absolutely. They've never had an undergrad transfer, and the grad transfers, I think they've had maybe 3 in the history of the program. And meanwhile, it used to be at least they weren't losing people to the transfer portal because people really want that Stanford degree. But now that's not even the case. Their top 2 running backs from last year, Austin Jones went to USC, and Nathaniel Pete went to Missouri as underclassmen, and that has never happened before. So it's not just that they're not getting people; it's that they're actually losing people.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously hurts as well. I mean, assuming some big turnaround from where they are right now this season, this will be a 4th straight year without a bowl for Stanford, and it's year 12 for David Shaw. And it seems like, at least coming into the season, most of the stuff that I read says, well, he's safe, for the immediate future. Has that changed at all? Is there a hot seat talk with David Shaw right now?
Yeah, I mean, you might have read some of that from me because I'm one of those people who said he's safe. I think what will most likely happen is, last year, like I said, they went 3-9 and it was ugly. Like those last 7 losses. I know Notre Dame was the last one, but there were a lot of games that they were just not competitive.
Yeah.
And he didn't make any staff changes, no coordinators, no coaches. They were one of 5 teams, I think, out of like 130 of the FBS who didn't change a single position coach. I think if anything's going to happen, and David Shaw, he's very loyal to his staff. He thinks, if the team doesn't do well, it's not because of the coaching, it's because of scheme or something. But I think if anything's going to change, it won't be David Shaw at the top. I still think he's pretty comfortable, but he might be forced to make some staff changes.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, if he's safe, you would think that could be coming next. And
yeah, the only reason I say that, not because he's doing a bang up job or anything, but if you look at the basketball program, I know we're talking about football, but Jared Haas this is entering his 6th year at Stanford, and they haven't made the tournament a single time, and he's still the coach.
Yeah.
So I think Stanford's unlike some other schools that would change as quickly.
As a Kansas alum who was in school when Jared was still playing, I kind of keep my eyes peeled out there every now and then to see how they're doing. It's like, man, I wish they were doing a little bit better, but that obviously hasn't quite happened, like you said, either. So, with the exception of the pandemic year, these teams have played every year going back to 1997, and Marcus Freeman called it a rivalry game this week. And I'm curious, does it feel like a rivalry game on that end? Is Notre Dame Stanford, does it feel like a rivalry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously there's a trophy on the line,
right?
But with Stanford, they have so many, I guess, like every other game, it seems like a rivalry game. Like they have a rivalry with USC. They have like Cal is kind of their natural rival. UCLA, and they have all these games that Oregon, like Stanford, Oregon was always, or historically had been in the last 20 years, for the top of the Pac-12 North. So it seems like every other week they're facing a game that could be considered sort of a rivalry. I think they do get up a little bit more for this than maybe like an Oregon State or a Washington State. But I wouldn't say that this is the game that they have circled on their calendar necessarily. Like this is the one that we're looking forward to. But I mean, it is on national TV all the time, every time. So I mean, that is something. It's going to be their longest road trip of the year. So I know they're preparing for that. But, sure. And really, at this point, I mean, any game is a big game for them. A chance to break their losing streak.
That's true.
I don't think they can be choosy.
That's true. We always see a lot of empty seats, even when Notre Dame does play out there. You mentioned Cal. Yeah. I mean, is that basically the game that's a guaranteed sellout? And, regardless of what the season happens to be and everything else is kind of up in the air, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. Cal gets the biggest crowd just because they're just based on proximity and they have a large alumni base kind of in the area. But yeah, the crowd, I mean, people don't go to Stanford for the big game day crowds. That's for sure. It's getting people in the stands has been a struggle. But I would say that Cal is probably the biggest crowds, and then Notre Dame and USC are probably next in line, and Oregon travels really well too.
Sure, that makes sense. We were talking about the future potentially of this series the other day. How important do you think it is on the Stanford end to keep this series with Notre Dame going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's obviously huge for recruiting in the middle of the country. Like I said, it's a guaranteed national TV spot every time. I mean, they recruit nationally, as does Notre Dame. So I think it's really important to have these rivalries that aren't just based on geography, like not just playing a West Coast schedule. It's important to get out in the Eastern time zone for sure. And like you said, I mean, it is very well attended. It's a high, usually a high caliber game. So I would assume that if Notre Dame would have Stanford, Stanford would want to continue it kind of in perpetuity.
I'm curious with, the USC, UCLA before the season started, the bombshell that they were going to be going to the Big Ten, and there was talk of Stanford in there and all that. So I guess first, sort of the reaction up there in Northern California and that area you're in to the USC, UCLA news, and then, anything new along the lines. I haven't heard much lately in terms of, Stanford possibly jumping, but I have heard, Kevin Warren saying that maybe a couple more teams could be coming in to the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially we were shocked, like pretty much everyone else. I think people maybe thought USC might be looking, but I think they were surprised that UCLA was going to go just because they're part of the Cal State system, and people thought they would be connected to Cal, and how could UCLA go and kind of abandon Cal? Obviously, they got around that. So, but yeah, I think it was a surprise. I mean, I think if the Pac-12 dissolves, then obviously Stanford needs a landing spot. But I don't think looking to go to the Big Ten. It sounds like the Big Ten, if they wanted whoever they wanted, they would have gotten originally. It sounds like so. I think they are kind of holding their fire for a little bit at least. So I don't anticipate any moves kind of in the near future. I know the TV contracts are being negotiated right now. I think once that comes out, that might settle some things down. The expanded playoffs helps. People maybe say, well, do I really want to jump to the Big Ten and maybe be the 5th or 6th best team when the Pac-12, it's wide open. I could be in the playoffs every year if I have a good, a 10-win team. So I haven't, like you said, it's been kind of quiet lately. They seem like Stanford, schools like Stanford would be a good fit academically for the Big Ten. Sure. I'm sure if they were invited, they would go if it meant, the Pac-12 just rating them and being rated, and then there would be no more Pac-12. They'd need someplace to go. But yeah, I think just like everyone else, I think they were surprised.
Right.
And sort of just waiting to see what the next steps are. It's pretty wild.
As someone who covers it, how confident are you in the future of the Pac-12 and them staying together?
I think in the short to middle term, like in the next, I think they'll get this next TV contract on maybe like 5 or 6 years, and I think I'm confident that they'll stay together for that long.
Okay.
I think after that, sort of all bets are off. I think, what this SC and UCLA thing showed is that there's no kind of certainty anymore. And historic, you mentioned, Stanford and Notre Dame have been playing since 97. They've been playing USC and UCLA since World War I practically. So obviously that doesn't matter anymore. Geographic, proximity doesn't matter. So I think it would be kind of foolish to say that anything's for sure, kind of more than 5 years down the line. But I think for the next, through the length of this next TV contract, it should be secure.
All right. Well, as far as this team, like last week, they looked like they were going to end a 9-game Pac-12 losing streak. They're playing Oregon State. They blow a 14-point lead in the second half. How did that just get away from them the way it did?
Yeah, they were actually up to 14 points in the fourth quarter, and they blew that. And it's pretty. You sort of expect it now, just because the way that the last year plus has gone. Stanford hasn't beaten FBS team since I think October 2nd, 2021. So we're entering the 54th week of that, and most of those games have not been close. This one was. It's sort of just indicative of a lot of things that have gone wrong for Stanford in the last 3 or 4 years that we've been talking about it. They couldn't run out the clock. They couldn't get that last first down. That they gave the ball back to Oregon State. Their defense sort of collapsed at the worst possible time. They gave up a 55-yard touchdown pass with 13 seconds left. They were kind of out of position. Yeah, I know. It was sort of, on the one hand, kind of a little bit of a fluky play, like the receiver caught it off the defensive back's helmet, but then the safety was out of position. So it was a little bit of bad luck, but also bad form. So it's why. And then when things start rolling the way that they're rolling, Stanford doesn't really have any game experience to fall back on. Like, this is how we close out a game. Like, this is how we make winning plays. So this just hasn't happened forever.
Right. Well, just looking at them statistically, there are a lot of lowlights, kind of what, as you alluded to off the top. I guess starting with the offense, they've scored some points, actually. They can score a little bit, but does everything kind of ride on Tanner McKee, the quarterback's shoulders with that offense?
Yeah, for sure. And especially now, they're down to really one healthy running back. Like I said, the top 2 running backs transferred in the offseason. And then they actually had EJ Smith, who was Emmitt Smith's son. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yep.
He was going to start a running back. His first carry was an 87-yard touchdown, first carry of the season. It was against Colgate, but still that showed some promise. Had, 100-yard game. And then I think after the second week, he was second in the Pac-12 in rushing. And then he suffered a season-ending injury. And so now they're down to really like their 4th-string running back. His name's Casey Filkins. He's a good player, but then there's no depth behind him. And when you think about those Toby Gerhardt, like you said, Christian, these guys that just carry the ball time and time again, they can't really afford to do that with Casey. He's not really built that way. And so a lot is reliant on the passing game, which is on Tanner McKee's shoulders. Like you said, they do have some talent there. They have been putting up some points, but then the defense just has been unable to stop the run, get any kind of quarterback pressure. So it's been an issue on that side of the ball.
Well, and it is amazing looking at the fact that a Stanford team is giving up over 200 rushing yards a game, and they're giving up over 32 points a game as well. Is there anything that defense has that they can hang their hats on right now?
Yeah, their secondary is strong. They should be getting Kyu Blu-Kelly, their top cornerback. He missed last week's game against Oregon State. They should be getting him back. So I'd say the secondary is strong, but like I said, the defensive line, it's young, it's inexperienced. They're kind of getting pushed around. And the other thing is they're just not getting any turnovers. They've only had 2 takeaways all season. I mean, that includes a game against Colgate,
Right.
which is one of their 2 takeaways. So, it's bad enough that they can't get off the field. They can't stop the run. So it's really like a multitude of issues, as you would expect for a team that's 1-4. Not much going right. And 0-4 against the FBS.
Well, but going back to the fact that they are giving up over 200 yards a game, just watching them a little bit, I mean, they look like they've got guys who are at least similar to, body types and stuff like that. Why are they so bad against the run?
Yeah, they did switch their alignment from last year to this year. They had played kind of a 3-4. They're back to a 4-3, trying to take advantage of some of their personnel, but it's just not working. Yeah, like you said, I mean, they're recruiting the same types of guys. If you look at their roster, it's the same kind of guys, but I don't know if they're not getting coached up. They're not improving from freshman to senior year. They're not able to bring in added, additional talent.
Sure.
And they've hit a little bit by injuries, not so much on the defense, actually. That's more on the offense. So you can't even blame the injuries. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the Stanford coaching staff is really struggling with. So if I had the answer,
that
would be amazing, because I don't even think Stanford has an answer for that one.
Apparently not, since it kind of continues week after week.
Right.
Well, so Notre Dame's favored by 2 touchdowns. What needs to happen for Stanford to make a game out of it this Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly, like I said, they need to start getting to the quarterback. They need to start forcing turnovers, because it's not where, if the defense can't stop these drives, with turnovers and anything like that, with sacks, then they're just going to get run down.
Yeah.
I think alternatively, I mean, Stanford, they did have a problem turning the ball over, which was kind of like a double whammy. They had something like 4 turnovers in each of the first 3 games. They kind of cut down on those. So that's good. I mean, they certainly need to win the turnover battle. I know that's kind of obvious.
Yep.
And then, just get some explosive plays out of the offense and kind of hold on. I don't know. I mean, I think the spread is it's probably an accurate reflection of where these teams are. I think I don't see many ways that Stanford's going to win this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that neither one of these teams are forcing turnovers this year. Notre Dame's not forcing them either.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. I think they're the bottom 2.
If one of these 2 teams happens to, cause a bevy of turnovers, I think that's a big factor right there. But we haven't seen it, like you said, you haven't seen it from Stanford. We obviously haven't seen it from Notre Dame. So,
yeah.
All right, Harold Gutman, he's from the Bay Area News Group, covers the Stanford Cardinal. We appreciate your time. It's not supposed to be too cold here in town this weekend, so
that's good. I know it's also I know it's a 7:30 kick your time, but it's 4:30 for Stanford, which is the earliest they've played all season. They had 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I think they're excited for a slightly earlier start.
Used to the late ones by now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Hey, Harold, I appreciate you doing this. I know you've got a lot going on. Appreciate you jumping on and talking a little Stanford with us. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I hope it's a good game on Saturday. I hope I'm wrong.
All right, so there was Harold Gutman, and while that was going on, John Mayo had a question. Why are people afraid to admit the reason they're trending down the hill is because Shaw is a terrible coach? It's not rocket science. And, I mean, it's hard to argue with that, because that is the direction they were trending. I always wondered, to Shaw's credit, he was able to keep it going longer than I thought he would after Jim Harbaugh was there. Because, again, this is year 12, and it's really been the last 4 years that the slide has begun. The slide really started 4 years ago when these 2 teams met at Notre Dame Stadium. They were both top 10 teams. Notre Dame won a lopsided game. Stanford, I think, finished 9-4 that season. But they have had the only winning record they've had since then was 4-2 in the pandemic year. It's been losing records since then, Vince.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and we'll just give Notre Dame all the credit for them starting the slide for Stanford. That's what we'll do.
That's right,
and it makes perfect sense. And that was their first non-10 win season in forever. And it's been. They haven't looked back. Let's put it that way. They haven't looked back, and that is now ancient history for Stanford. And they are a shell of what they used to be. And it is hard to not look at the head coach. I mean, I agree. And as much as I kind of like David Shaw, I mean, I don't dislike him, right? It's not like when I would sit in the media room and Jim Harbaugh would come in and I wanted to throat punch him most of the time. And so I don't get that feeling when I think about David Shaw. So, but this industry is a cutthroat industry, and if you're not producing, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. With all that said, Vince, are you ready for game day rapid fire?
Yeah, I'm always ready for game day rapid fire.
Let's just start off with our Stanford question then, since we're kind of on that topic right now. Fill in the blank. You would fill blank if Notre Dame and Stanford never played again after today.
Slightly disappointed because you threw the word never in.
Okay.
I don't mind, and there's a faction of Notre Dame fans out there that just want them to play like academic schools and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I get it. You want to reward like-minded schools like a Northwestern, like a Vanderbilt, like a Stanford, because they keep their standards high. And I do appreciate that as a Notre Dame fan. And so I just don't want them on the schedule all the time. I mean, I have no problem having one of those a year, right? And so maybe put it into a rotation. Find 4 like-minded schools, put them into a rotation. You play one of them each year, okay? Obviously, Virginia would fit that bill, but they're an ACC team, so they're going to be in the rotation anyway. So I don't know who that 4th school would be, but like I said, a Northwestern, a Vanderbilt, a Stanford, right? You find a 4th school, you put them into a rotation, you play one a year, and you're good to go. I would be very happy with that as opposed to playing Stanford year in and year out.
Yeah, I can see everything that you're saying, but personally, I would feel remorseless if Notre Dame and Stanford never played again. It's never done anything for me. The fact, just because they've started playing every year for the last 25 years, again, with the exception of the pandemic year, it's just never been that exciting a game for me. It's never been on the level of USC or Michigan for me, or even Michigan State or Purdue. Absolutely. Before that. The only thing it's really accomplished is, whenever Notre Dame decided we want to be on the West Coast every Thanksgiving weekend. So one year you've got Southern California, the other year you've got Northern California. I get, and the question that comes up, as Rob asked earlier, if we give up playing Stanford every year, who would you get to replace them on a yearly basis? And this is something that we did talk about during the week, but there are plenty of West Coast schools. Like if you want to be on the West, because one, it's Northern California. It's not even Southern California, where it's USC.
Recruiting that Southern California is.
Yeah.
I mean, you just happen to be in the same state.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, as people who have been out there know, it's practically a different state to begin with. But there's UCLA, there's Cal if you wanted to. There's Oregon farther north, there's Washington.
Yeah.
Why not just replace these? As you said, okay, if you want to keep them as part of a rotation, make them like maybe every 4th or 5th year or something like that. Okay, but rotate those other schools through.
Yeah.
Do a home and home with UCLA that weekend, with Oregon, with Washington, whoever it happens to be, with Cal. Get them all on the rotation. Just because a Notre Dame club decided to buy a trophy and turn it into a trophy game doesn't make it any more a rivalry for me. I've just never bought into it.
No, and I never will. I mean, it was competitive very briefly, and it just hasn't been. And I don't see it getting back to that point anytime soon. So it doesn't get me excited, like you said. And the fact that it's a night game makes it even worse, in my opinion. I do not like this game being the night game. And I realize the home slate, they wanted 2 night games. The Clemson game is a no-brainer. They wanted a night game in October, and there really isn't.
Yeah, what else are you going to make the night game if you're going to have a couple home night games?
Right. No doubt about it. And so I get it. I understand it. I just don't like it. I would rather it be a bigger game to be a night game. If I'm having to stay up till 2 a.m, I would enjoy it being a better opponent. And, as we're knocking Stanford, of course, they'll probably come out and win. So, got to be careful there. But at the same time, Stanford just doesn't do anything for me. They just don't.
And of course, Bill Walsh, who once coached Stanford and did Notre Dame games on TV for a while, says, good point, big state. I realize it's not the same Bill Walsh, but still.
That's great.
All right. Michael Mayer has 71. He had 71 receptions for 840 yards and 7 touchdown catches last year. They're all single season records for a Notre Dame tight end. Do you buy or sell him breaking all 3 of those records this season?
I think there's a decent possibility. The touchdown one, I think he has a great shot at getting. I think he's going to have a great shot at getting all 3 of those. I mean, I'm trying to convince myself otherwise on the other 2, on the receptions and the yards, but I think they're all doable, especially if Drew Pine wants to keep force feeding the ball to him, which
seriously,
we haven't seen it not happen. And so at this point, you have to assume that it's going to continue to happen. And I get it. I think he's going to get all of it. His name, he is rewriting the tight end record book at Notre Dame, which is saying something considering who they've had in that tight end room over the years.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little less than a third of the way to the yards right now. He's almost halfway to the receptions right now. I'd be shocked if he doesn't end up with at least 10 touchdown catches this season, the way he's going. Jesse and I did an over-under of 89.5 receptions for the season for him. Now, that's going to be a high clip, but at the rate he's going right now, through 5 games, he has 33. I think he's got a really good shot of topping 90. Again, unless somebody does,
13
games. With the bowl game thrown in there, which counts.
Right.
So I think that he's definitely going to break all 3 of the single season records that he set last year. And again, to me, the biggest question is going to be, what do the receptions end up being? Do they end up being a massive haul that some other tight end is going to have a heck of a time ever even thinking about breaking? I think that he's very realistically going to have a chance to get at least 90 catches this year. So,
yeah, I think that's a legitimate possibility. I mean, I hope he doesn't, because that means that they got some other people involved in the pass game.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the other thing, because where he is right now with the catches, his 33 catches are the same amount as the next 2 guys, Lorenzo Styles and Chris Tyree combined. They have 19 and 14 equals 33. He has 33 right now. And that's the thing, until and unless somebody else steps up,
right,
who else is going to get the receiving yards?
Exactly. Somebody. Not only do they need to, it's a twofold, and we've kind of beat this dead horse. It's a twofold situation. They need to get open, and Drew Pine needs to throw it to them, right?
Yep.
Both of those things need to occur for the wide receivers to get more involved, and the running backs, for that matter, in the pass game. And, Chris Tyree would have 1 more reception if he didn't drop that screen, and he'd have a heck of a lot more yards, too.
True. Which has the better chance to happen today? All 3 Irish running backs top 100 yards, or an Irish receiver has the first 100-yard day for an Irish receiver this season? This kind of ties into what we were just talking about.
So I need some clarification. Is it 100 yards total for each running back, or 100 yards on the ground?
This is, how did I do the question? Yeah, 100 yards from scrimmage. 100 yards from scrimmage, not on the ground. Sorry.
That makes my answer a little bit more complicated then, because I was saying if it was rushing yards, I'd say I'd see 2 out of the 3 getting 100 potentially, but not 3. Oh man, we're talking about throwing in the passing game, and I think that could really. You know what? I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm going to say the wide receiver. There's a wide receiver that's going to get 100 yards today. Let's mark it down. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think that I've got to go the way the running backs are trending right now. During this 3-game winning streak, at least 1 running back has topped 100 yards from scrimmage in each game. You go back to Cal, Tyree, and Estime did it. You go to North Carolina, they all 3 did it. And then last week, because of the 1 catch that Estime had, he did it as well. They're just the way that they're able to mix and match these guys right now, and the fact that we haven't seen a Notre Dame receiver really step up.
Yeah.
I've got to go with the odds and go with especially considering the fact that what Stanford is, they're a sieve against the run. They're the worst run defense Notre Dame has seen this season. So again, they won't all top 100 yards on the ground. If they did, that would be amazing. But I do think total yards all three have a better chance to get to that mark than an Irish receiver, just based on everything we've been talking about, that we still haven't seen a receiver step up. We're waiting for it.
We're waiting.
But I think the odds are better that that the three running backs
All right.
all go over 100 yards from scrimmage again.
The best part is I'll be sitting right next to you, and I'll be like, see, I told you.
That's true. That's true. Brent Smith, come on, man. You can't just focus on the negative. Michael Mayer dropped a critical third down from Pine last Saturday. Well, yeah, but he also converted 5 other third downs.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
You're right. It's a catch that he should have made, but really that was the only blemish on his day last week.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, he did have 11 catches and over 100 yards receiving, if I remember correctly. So
the 11 catches a record for a Notre Dame tight end. Come on, man. I mean, high expectations, I get it, but come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Nobody's perfect.
That's right. Okay, so Notre Dame and Stanford tied for last in the nation with just 2 turnovers forced apiece. Over under 1 total turnover in today's game.
Oh, man. Well, McKee is going to want to throw the ball, or they're going to want to throw the ball with McKee, I should say. That's really the only way they're going to get the offense going. And my hope is that they're able to pick off a couple passes today. I don't know that they're going to get any fumbles or anything like that, but I'm hoping they can pick off a few. And so I'm going to say over. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say over, but of all of the predictions made on this game, this is the one that I am least confident in.
Yeah, I know. Because, really, even their first interception last week against BYU was a gift. Like what Hall was doing on that throw on the very first play that Bracey picked off. It's like, what are you doing there? Yeah. Where are you even throwing that ball?
There was sky ball. I mean, it just went straight up and straight down. I mean, it wasn't even a competitive throw. And if Bracey didn't pick that off, then we'd have bigger question marks about that.
Yeah. And kind of like I was talking about with Harold a few minutes ago, if one of these teams just out of the blue forces a lot of turnovers, that's going to be a huge factor in a game like this. I'm gonna say over. This feels like a game, because of the potential disruption Notre Dame should be able to force against a really suspect Stanford line that is likely to be out 2 starters, by the way. And I think we forgot to mention that earlier today. This should be a game where Notre Dame can force something, but we'll see. It hasn't happened so far.
Hopefully.
I know. Blake Fisher and Maris Leofau have both been named to the initial Comeback Player of the Year national watch list. Which of those two would you give it to if you had to make the decision today?
Well, I think overall, I'll go from a how they're playing standpoint. I think they've kind of harnessed what Marist is doing. I think he's going to play better moving forward based on them kind of figuring him out. But Blake Fisher's been more on the uptick recently.
Yeah.
He didn't play great at the beginning, but I feel like he is playing more consistent than Marist. And so I will go with Blake Fisher. And I know it's more difficult for an offensive lineman to win that award because there's just not the stat package to throw at people.
Yeah, it's basically like sacks allowed are the biggest stat that you have for an offensive lineman.
Right. And so it's probably going to be tougher for him to win it, but I'm still going to go with what I see with my eyes. So I'll go with Blake Fisher.
Yeah, and you're right. There are not enough stats where you can kind of combine, it'll basically be for, Blake, how many sacks allowed? Most of them came early in the season. And then, as if the Irish run game keeps going more, they'll be able to say he contributed to an offensive line that helped pave the way for, Notre Dame to run for 200 yards a game, or, whatever it ends up being, that kind of thing. But the thing with Maris Leofau is linebacker is a very stat heavy position, and he just has not produced, whether it is stats or pressures or those kind of things. He has just been way too inconsistent. So I would have to put my vote in the Blake Fisher boat. I think that across the board, again, even though there are not a lot of stats to back it up, Blake Fisher's just played more consistently than Leofau has this year.
Yep, absolutely. And by the end of the year, maybe Leofau is going to have some of those eye-popping stats. That there's still plenty of not great offenses that they play against where that could be the case. And they also have 2 very high-level matchups where he could make some noise. So, there's still a possibility for him to take this over. But as of right now, I would go with Blake Fisher.
Right. Fill in the blank. You should fill blank. Oh, never mind. That was the wrong one. That's the one that we already did. A different fill in the blank. Tommy Rees said this week that he has to find a way to get Braden Lenzy going. The way to do that is blank.
You've got to get him going in multiple different directions. He's not just a take the top off the defense guy, right? You got to get him on some reverses. You've got to get him on some screens. You've got to get him on some quick slants. You've got to move him around a
Jet
little
sweep
bit.
type stuff.
Yeah, and they
shovel pass, whatever.
They've done that with him in the past, but they're not doing that with him this year. And so it's just like any other sport where if you want to get somebody going, you got to get the ball in their hands, right? You've got to get the ball in his hands in easier situations than just trying to outrun everybody, right? Because is that part of his game? Yes, no question. But to enhance that part of his game, throw in some short stuff so it forces the defense to come down on him and play him close. That way he can run past people. And so that's all part of it. And you've got to get the ball in his hands to get him going. And so, like you said, jet sweeps, reverses, all of that.
All those things you talked about. And if you motion him more, do some of that kind of stuff. And like, we didn't see a whole lot of the motion and stuff last week. And like, you just wonder how much Tommy Rees is, they've talked about there's going to be different game plans week to week. And it's like, kind of like a mixer board, you're sliding it up this week, you're sliding, this down, more bass, less, more treble, all those different kind of things. And it's kind of like that with some of these motions and things that they can do with Braden Lenzy, like just there are so many things with the different personnel packages that they have, Lenzy included, where you can set one thing up by doing another thing. And it just seems like using Braden Lenzy and the speed that he has, and even, like showing some of that, like jet sweep motion and stuff like that, sets him up for a chance to do more stuff down the road. And like the double move type stuff that really hasn't been a part of things so far, again, that can help him emphasize his speed. So I think all of the above could really get him going.
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
There are just so many things that they haven't done. So like when I say all of the above, all the stuff that you mentioned, plus, again, it's like you show a little play action one way with Estime or Tyree, and then you've got Braden Lenzy moving the other direction.
Right.
There's just, they just haven't capitalized on that speed that he's got so far.
No, absolutely. Like I said, if you want to get him going, quote unquote, right, you need to get the ball in his hands, and you've got to do it in a way that, is easy for both the quarterback and for the receiver. You've got to get the ball in his hands.
Right. Fred had a super chat earlier. He said, grab a beer with one. BVG, Urban, Singer. Now, who's Singer? Who
that would be Mike Singer from Blue and Gold Illustrated.
Wow. I don't know how that managed to find its way in here. I guess by default, I'm going to have to go Urban because, Urban, he can party a little bit. He showed us that.
And he definitely knows how to bring the party to a party. So I will, I appreciate that. It's going to be Urban for me as well. I've broken bread with Mike Singer, so that's out. And BVG, I have no desire to eat or drink with him. So, and
I saw him. I was in the vicinity of him, and I don't know if it was his girlfriend or wife at the time, at a frozen yogurt place right after he got hired. That's the closest I've come to, to breaking any bread with BVG. But
I think it would be fun to talk to Urban Meyer, not only about football and about his life and all of that. And look, he's obviously got his faults, but one of his former receivers was a head coach that I worked with, here locally. And so I'd love to ask him questions about him, just to kind of needle Jay a little bit. I think that would be a lot of fun. I actually think it would be a lot of fun I
didn't think about that connection. You're 1 degree removed from Urban Meyer, which makes me 2 degrees removed from Urban Meyer, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. I've heard a lot of stories about Urban from Jay, but I need to hear from the other direction,
All right. Game pick for tonight, Notre Dame and Stanford. Go.
Oh, my goodness. Well, look, this game is, I said it in our picks earlier, is that we're headed into week 6, and I still have a ton of questions about this team. I thought I would have a lot more of them answered to this point, but I don't, and, for example, can the O-line continue to move forward like we want them to? Can Drew Pine continue his hot streak if they continue to open the playbook? What is the linebacking core going to look like without Bo Bauer, right? Yeah. Can the interior D-line pick up the slack? Can Marcus Freeman get his team up to dominate an inferior opponent? I think that's a legit question right now, based on what we saw against Marshall and Cal. And so there's a lot of questions about this team. I think that they're going to show up. I think having it as a night game, even though I don't like it, I think the kids are going to get up for it. I think the players enjoy the atmosphere of a night game, right? And I think it's going to be a beautiful night in South Bend as far as the temperature and all of that is concerned. So you're not going to be dealing with adverse weather conditions. Remember how they reacted to the light show last year? Like, they were digging the light show, and there's going to be another one tonight. And so I just think that all the things surrounding and Marcus Freeman, hopefully learning from his mistakes, I think he is able to get this team up for this game. I've got Notre Dame winning 31-17. I think it's going to be a couple score game. I obviously don't have Notre Dame covering in that prediction because I think they're a 17-point favorite. But I still think they win by a couple scores.
Yeah. And it is weird how they, like, when you think about how this season is gone, they have not played well at home so far. Their two worst games are at home, Marshall and Cal, in back-to-back weeks. Now, the second half of Cal was better, but really they've played better away from home, whether it's at North Carolina or in Las Vegas or even the season opener against Ohio State. Can they kind of calm down maybe a little bit at home, the distractions at home and all those different things? I think what would impress me the most is seeing the defense step up and play a complete game. Because like all these different things, the fact that Notre Dame should be able to run the ball against a really bad Stanford run defense and all this different stuff. Stanford gets about 65% of its offense out of the passing game. And Notre Dame's defense, can they not give up a couple of those confounding big plays or an inexplicable long touchdown drive in the fourth quarter? Because we saw one of those again last week against BYU.
Yeah.
And all those things have made some of these games closer than they need to be. I'm going to stick with how I feel this game should be, based on, just looking at what these two teams are. I've got Notre Dame winning 42-20 tonight.
So you do have them covering.
Could it be lower scoring and a lot closer than that? Yes, but that's what I've got, assuming these teams play to what they've shown they are so far.
Yeah. No, look, it's funny because my prediction does not have Notre Dame covering, but I am like super tempted to take Notre Dame and minus the points. You know what I mean? It's just which Notre Dame team shows up. That's the biggest question. And I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to win by a couple scores. It's just that 17 points, man. It's kind of scary.
Irish Blooded says we're on the same page, but he also says he'd like to see the offense step up and play a complete game. The defense has been doing more this year today. The offense is more about self-imposed game plans that have really, to me, that have dictated whether or not this team plays to its potential, like what the game plan happens to be. And like Jesse made a good point the other day, like with some of the personnel packages that they have, the fact that they have so many, multiple personnel packages, that can put the defenses in a bind the way they're able to run, personnel packages on and off, whether it's two backs here, two tight ends there. But I think you and I are on the same page. I don't like to see them get hung up in these 12 and 13 personnel packages play after play, especially stop doing it in the red zone. Right. That's really what has kept them from scoring more points. Great. Is when, okay, we get into the red zone. Now we're going to downshift. We think we're going to be a power football team with all these tight ends, and they haven't been able to punch the ball in the end zone.
Yep, absolutely. And you know what? Let's not get into 13 personnel with our backs up against the goal line either. Like, that's true. There's a time and a place for 13 personnel, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be in the playbook. I'm not saying that at all. It should be. but I don't like the way that they're using it currently, you know?
Right. All right, let's do some of these other picks before we wrap up our show today, Vince.
Yeah, we're going to have to kind of fly through these a little bit because we only have 9 minutes, but that's okay. We will do our best. So we're going to kind of do it in 2 categories, Sean. We're going to start with kind of national big picture games, and then we're going to do Notre Dame implication games and what that looks like. Okay. So here we go. Penn State. I'll set it up. You go, and then I'll go, and then I'll set it up. How about we just do that? Does that work?
Okay. Yep.
All right. So number 10, Penn State travels to Michigan, a high noon start on Fox. That's their big noon Saturday game. I believe it's number 10, Penn State, number 5, Michigan. What say you?
All right. We know Michigan hasn't played anyone. That storyline has been played. We know that. Penn State, it's like, who have they really played? Auburn and Purdue are the 2 best teams they've played. But Penn State's still only allowing 80 rushing yards per game. But, you've got these 2 unbeaten teams. Michigan, their best win is what? Like Maryland, I guess. But Blake Corum, he has been almost an unstoppable freight train right now, averaging 122 rushing yards a game. We talked about Notre Dame's third down conversions earlier. Michigan, because of how they run the ball, is converting 45% on third downs this season. So I like this to be around a touchdown game, and I like Michigan to win 27-20.
We're pretty much in the same area. What I'm worried about, and we talk about third down conversions, Penn State is 34% on the season, and I think that is going to end up being a key stat in this one as well. They stop the run really well statistically, but they've also played against teams that can't run the football.
Yeah.
So, you almost can throw that stat out, and obviously Michigan can run the ball pretty effectively. And so I'm hoping for a close game. No one would love to see Michigan lose more than me, but I don't think that today is the day that will occur. I've got Michigan 24, Penn State 17 in a top 10 matchup, which is scary.
All right.
Next up on the list is number 3, Alabama travels to number 6, Tennessee. This may be the game of the day if we're not talking about, our affinity for Notre Dame. This is going to be a very interesting game, Sean. It's at 3:30 on CBS.
Yeah, and to me, it comes down to one thing and one thing only. Is Bryce Young going to play for Alabama or not? And I don't know if you saw my picks. Maybe you can say I cheated, but I made 2 different picks.
Ooh.
One is if Bryce Young plays. The other is if he doesn't play. Because that's the factor. The volunteer pass defense is their weakness. And if you have Bryce Young in your Alabama, you can attack that. I'm not so confident they can. John Milroe was competent last week against Texas A&M, but just competent is not going to cut it against this Tennessee team. They've got to be able to attack, and then you mix in Jahmyr Gibbs and the running, and then, on the other side, you've got this volunteer offense that's really good. Alabama's defensive front should be able to make things more difficult for Hendon Hooker today. But again, I've got 2 different picks. With Bryce Young, Alabama wins 35-28. Without Bryce Young, Tennessee wins 28-24.
Wow. Okay. So all right. So
you've got to respect that.
I do. No, look, not having the quarterback is a huge thing.
I'm not going to wager on this game, obviously, because of the Bryce Young factor.
I wouldn't touch it. But here's what I will say. I think Alabama wins either way.
Okay.
I do. As much as I think Tennessee is a good offensive team, I think Hendon Hooker is a good quarterback, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think Tennessee has an opportunity to make some waves tonight. They have an opportunity. They could win this game. It would not surprise me, but I still feel like Alabama is Alabama at the end of the day. I don't think Tennessee is in their wheelhouse just yet. And so whether Bryce Young plays or not, I think Alabama wins 27-24.
Okay.
That's more of a non-Bryce Young pick, I think, but I still think Alabama wins this game in the end.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right. One that is near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Number 19, Kansas Jayhawks travel to Oklahoma. It's at noon, so that's 4 minutes from now. I know that's why you want to get out of here. It's on ESPN2. Go ahead.
So the bad news for my Jayhawks is the starting quarterback, Jalen Daniels, injured his shoulder against TCU last week at the end of the first half. Now, his status has been in question all week. There were reports he was going to be out all season. That's apparently not the case anyway, according to what they are saying. But he is not going to play this game, barring some miracle. But the good news is Last year's starter, Jason Bean, came in the second half against the Horned Frogs last week, threw for nearly 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. The question with him is, can he avoid the critical mistake? There was an interception that he threw last week that essentially led to what was the deciding touchdown. Oklahoma gets Dylan Gabriel, their quarterback, this week back after he missed last week with a concussion. But here's the thing, that's going to help them, but it's not going to help their defense, which gave up nearly 300 rushing yards per game to Kansas State, TCU, and Texas. 300 rushing yards per game. So do this. And Vigo asked earlier if I got my picks in. Kansas plus 8.5. That's a lock. Okay. They're 5-0-1 against the spread this season after TCU last week when they pushed it 7 points. I think they're going to go to Norman. They're going to win this game 45-35, which means pound the over as well.
That's a good call. I don't care who the quarterback is for Kansas. You and I could be the quarterback for Kansas and still put points up on Oklahoma. That's how bad their defense is.
Yeah.
It's really, really bad. So I've got Kansas winning as well. I've got them winning 37-28, and I would take Kansas in the points because either way, you're going to win that one. There's no doubt about it.
That's right. And I do have that parlay, by the way. So you go.
Good
Just
for you.
Good for you. Hey, I've been on the Kansas parlays all week, and again, they pushed on that 7 last week.
Yeah.
So
yep. And I haven't gotten mine in, and I don't know if I'm not going to get them in before 12 o'clock kickoff, so I need to get moving here. Yeah. All right. So now these are going to have all these are going to have a Notre Dame flair to them. We'll kind of roll through them here a little bit. Number 7 USC travels to Utah. Number 20 Utah. Utah is favored by 3.5. 8 o'clock tonight on Fox.
Yeah, and Lincoln Riley's done what he's supposed to do so far. USC is 6-0. They've beaten up on a bunch of tomato cans.
Yeah, they have.
But they're plus 15 in the turnover margin, and they also have 24 sacks to lead the nation. So they're killing it in those categories. But the Utes have only allowed 5 sacks this season. Part of it's because they run the ball so well, and that's basically this game. Utah is going to be much more physical than USC has seen. That is their weakness. They just haven't, seen an opponent that can take advantage of it. So I've got Utah winning 35-27.
I've got Utah winning by a field goal, 27-24. I think they out-physical USC on the road. Utah plays better at home, and they play with more physicality at home. I think that continues. This will be the first time that USC gets punched in the mouth. I want Utah to win this game. I really do. And I know that maybe people will say it's better for USC to win, strength of schedule and all that. They're going to be ranked. Notre Dame plays them. I still think Utah's going to win.
Yeah.
All right. NC State, they're number 15. They travel to Syracuse. They're number 18. Syracuse is a 3.5-point favorite. The game is at 3:30 on the ACC network.
Yeah, and this is NC State. Their only loss is to Clemson. Syracuse, their best win is Purdue. I like NC State winning a close one.
I'm going the other way. I've got Syracuse 28, NC State 24. And the reason is, and this is a homer pick to a degree, I need Syracuse to win this game because they're going to get beat next week against Clemson. I want them to be ranked when Notre Dame plays them. So that's another ranked opponent that Notre Dame victory against.
All right.
Clemson, Florida State, number 4 Clemson, unranked Florida State at Florida State. Clemson's only a 3.5-point favorite, 7:30 tonight on ABC.
Yeah, Florida State's lost to Wake Forest and NC State since the 4-0 start. This is going to be 3 in a row. Clemson wins.
And Clemson wins big. I mean, Florida State's just not ready to hang with Clemson yet. It's going to be a couple score game. I'm not even going to give you points. It's going to be a couple scores, and it's not going to be as exciting as anybody wants it to be.
Right.
Arkansas, BYU, 3:30 ESPN. This will wrap it up for us.
Interesting one here. The Hogs have had a tough run with Texas A&M, Alabama, Mississippi State. They played Mississippi State without their starting quarterback last week. He's supposed to be back this week. Arkansas averages 233 rushing yards a game. BYU's kryptonite, as we saw last week. And so even though Arkansas is a slight underdog, I like them to go into Provo and win.
I'm still on the Arkansas bandwagon. I believe they get their quarterback back. I get all these teams confused after a while, but I still like Arkansas in this one. I was not really all that impressed with BYU. Was their quarterback injured? Maybe, but he wasn't even the best quarterback on the field last week. I don't think he's going to be the best quarterback on the field this week. So I'm taking Arkansas on the road as well. And I'll take Arkansas on the point since I think they're going to win outright.
All right. You froze up for a minute on my end. I'm worried that it might be my internet. So we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. And don't forget that special Irish Breakdown show coming up at 3:30 this afternoon. They're going to be over there by the Golden Dome. You won't want to miss it. Some special stuff coming up during that show. So thanks to everyone for joining us. As always, we had a great one today. Vince, I will see you in a few hours over at the stadium.
Yes, you will. I'll be 3 sports deep at that point. So I will see you then.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later. And of course, the post-game show coming up after the game later on tonight as well. It'll be a late one. So don't pound too many of your beverages. Bring your coffee later tonight.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, people.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you later. IB Countdown to Kickoff.